Welcome. In this session, we will dive into the fundamentals of Azure Virtual Networks, VNet, covering some key components like subnets, address space, and how to actually plan and implement a secure network environment for your Azure resources. So let's get started. Understanding VNets, subnet, and address spaces. Let's start with VNet. A virtual network is a logical isolation of Azure resources within the Azure cloud. It allows Azure resources to securely communicate with each other and with on-premises network as well. A VNet is a foundation of your network infrastructure in Azure and plays a critical role in securing and managing communication between Azure services, plus your on-prem infrastructure as well, if they are connected. Remember, the line of sight must be there. VNet, or virtual network, act as isolated environment for your resources. They provide private IP addresses for resources within a network bubble, ensuring that secure communication between them can be implemented. Now, once you have VNet, what will happen if you try to divide it into smaller segments? Well, you will create subnets. A subnet, subdivision of a network, right? It's in the name. It's a division of a network into smaller segments. Segment, sorry, not segments. Subnets allow you to organize your resources in a way that meets both security and performance needs. It creates further isolation. You can have multiple subnets in a VNet to isolate different services or application or even department tiers. Each subnet can have its own network security settings and routing configuration to control traffic flow and security routes. For example, a front-end subnet may be configured to allow public access, while a back-end subnet might be restricted to only allow internal communication. The next component is address spaces. Well, an address space defines the range of IP addresses that a VNet can use. This range should be carefully planned to ensure it doesn't overlap with any other Azure virtual network you have or you might create in the future. This is true for your on-premises network as well if you are going to connect it in the future. So, network must not overlap. Now, VNets use private IP address range, typically from this RFC 1918 address space protocol, that is Class A, Class B, and Class C, where Class A is 10.0.0.0/8, where /8 is your CIDR. Class B, that is 172.16.0.0/12, or 192.168.0.0/16. Now, planning the address space correctly is crucial for avoiding IP conflicts and ensuring a smooth communication between VNets and other networks, whether it is coming from on-premises or even a separate cloud platform, such as AWS connected to Azure networks. Now, the private communication. Well, resources within a VNet can communicate privately, meaning they don't use the public internet to access data or to exchange data with other networks or public domain. This adds a layer of security since internal traffic remains within a private network. Now, Azure automatically routes traffic between resources within a VNet. By default, no public IP address is required for internal communication within a VNet. Now, you may have multiple subnets for it. When you will create multiple subnets, you also have to plan the provision of those subnets. Here, a careful planning of your subnets is essential to ensure future scalability and security. Determining how many subnets you will need based on your application architecture or future growth of your company. Consider NSG, network security groups, to control traffic flow and route tables to direct traffic properly between multiple subnets. Now we can go to the lab and see how easy it is to create VNets and also to subdivide it with the help of subnets. So let's go to the lab. All right, now let's see how to deploy a virtual network. So for that, I will go to my portal and search for a virtual network. I already have it here. And right now, I don't have any isolated network created. So let's deploy the first one. So click on Create. And then I have to give some basic information for project. So that will be my subscription and my resource group. I don't have one, so I will just deploy a demo resource group. The next is you have to give your virtual network a unique name. This name need not to be unique in multiple tenants or globally, but inside your own tenant, it should be unique. So I'll call it VNet01 and the region where you want to deploy this virtual network. So that will be kind of central. Now, this is actually a nice feature from Azure that you can also add security over your network. So if you want to have a VPN encrypted tunnel, right? So you can go with that. Virtual network encryption. So with this, your virtual network communication will be encrypted, right? While traveling within this network. We don't want that at this point. The next is Azure Bastion. Basically, if you want to deploy a separate subnet for Azure Bastion, yet another service of Azure, basically Bastion provides you a secure place from which you can connect to your internal resources. Bastion will make sure that your internal resources are not exposed to public domain. Only the Bastion will be exposed to public domain, means Bastion will have a public IP in the front end. The back end of Bastion will be private IPs. And who will give private IPs to Bastion? Of course, your network will give the IPs to Bastion. So you can create a subnet right away. The next one is a subnet for Azure Firewall. Basically, Azure Firewall also need internal IP structure to communicate with internal infrastructure. Plus, you can also put DDoS attack protection on top of this network. Again, a paid service and expensive one. But if this network is going to be in your production environment and you want to safeguard this isolated bubble, then it's a good idea to put a DDoS protection on top of it. So this was your security blade or security section. Next is IP addresses. Basically, you can just create your IP address section over here. This can be IPv4 or it can be IPv6 as well. I will go with IPv4. Now, what IP address you want? You have to decide your IP address. I will go with the default class A. Azure always give a default IP address, but you can always remove it or change it. Now let's add a subnet. Remember, Bastion Firewall, that is what I was talking about previously. But you can give your own name. Let's say I will call it VNet01 subnet 01. So this is the first subnet of the first network I'm going to create. So this is the address space. And what will be the subnet size? Basically, you can decide. If the CIDR is /24, you get 256 addresses minus 5. Remember, 5 addresses are actually reserved by Azure. In general networking, network and broadcast, two addresses are reserved. Rest is usable by the host. But in Azure, five are reserved. And then again, you can actually connect it with the NAT gateway. You can also put or assign a NSG to it for added security. Or you can also go with service endpoint. These are all the advanced features which work with your virtual network. But this is the basic one to add a subnet. Let's add it. Now let's move ahead. Click next. You can add your tags over here. And let's go ahead and create a network. All right, I will wait for it. Perfect. Now we can go to the resource. So this is your virtual network. Now, you can assign or remove the role to or from a person. Means you can play with RBAC privileges over this network. Then you have your address spaces. You can add additional address spaces if you want in the same virtual network. You can see all the connected devices here. Right now, there is none. And if you pay attention, if you go to subnet, yes, it should be 256, right? But minus, it will remove 5. So this is the available IP address. Can you add more subnets? Of course, you can keep on adding more subnets. Any bastion which is connected or deployed over this network? No, we have never deployed a bastion, but you can. Any DDoS protection? No. Any firewall? No. Do we have a defender for cloud over it? No. Basically, it's a default and very simple network, but you can see that so many other services can work with your network. Then you have Network Manager. This is where you actually configure your DNS servers. By default, DNS service and DHCP service is provided by Azure. But if you have your own DNS server or DHCP server as IaaS, infrastructure as a service, running on Azure or anywhere, basically, you can change it over here. Then if you want to connect with other networks, you will do it here, peering. Then you have your endpoint, service endpoint, private endpoints. Both can be configured or managed from here. Then you have your properties of this network. Then we have resource lock. You can lock this network so that no one can intentionally or accidentally delete it or change it. Then we have monitoring, where you can monitor the logs and also the matrix of this network if you want to see how well your network is performing. Then we have automation, where you can use Azure Function apps or even Azure Automation to automate certain things or deployment. And if you still need help, you can always raise a ticket. Or we have connection troubleshooting. Basically, from here, you can test your connectivity with other resources. So a lot can be done over here, guys. So that was your simple virtual network. All right, now let's understand the use of multiple networks or multiple address spaces in just one network. And why do you want to do that? So if we go back to our virtual network, I already have one virtual network called VNet 01. So if I go to address spaces, as you can see, I can deploy multiple resources to this network, and they will get the IP address within this IP address space. That is class A 10.0.0.0. I already have a subnet for it. But can we deploy another address space, a separate other address space? Can we say 10.0.0.0? I want one more, 10.0.0.0. The answer is no, you cannot do that. In the same network, you cannot have overlapping IP addresses. So that is the problem. Now, can I deploy 10.0.0.0/16, which is the same address space, but separately? Let's try that.
VNet 0 or 2 and the same address space. I will call it VNet 02 and this will be the subnet 01. So it's the first subnet of the second network. Let's see if we get any error. Remember, both IPs are same. So I don't think so we are getting any errors here. Let's see if it actually gets deployed or not. All right, it got deployed. So isn't it actually overlapping right now? It should, right? Now, that's the point you have to remember. These two networks are separate, totally isolated bubbles. So, just like your house, in your house, your phone or your devices can have the IP address such as 192.168.1.10 or something like that. In the other house, or maybe your friend's house, they can also have the same IP address. They are separate, they are not on the same network. The problem is, in the future, I cannot connect these networks. Then there will be an overlap and there will be a problem of IP conflict. Now, if I go to the same network, can I deploy another IP address space? Let's say 192.168.0.0/16, class C. Let's do that. Let's try it. So let me save it. And it should work. And here we go. We have another address space. Now we can add the subnet for that address space. VNet 01 subnet 02, a second subnet, but not for this one. Oh, it's not even actually refreshed yet. Let's try now. Here we go. So I'm not going to change its name. It's okay. Add it. It should work. Here we go. So now you know that it should work. And why do we have two approaches? Remember, in your organization, if you want to keep a proper isolated network boundaries for higher security, yes, you can create multiple networks to totally keep them separate. This will give you isolated boundaries, and now you can manage your security, your connection, your routing separately. So it gives you more, I will say, flexibility here. But if you're creating a simple infrastructure where you just want all the departments or all the resources to communicate each other very easily without creating any route tables, without connecting any networks, you want to keep it simple, in that case, you can deploy multiple address spaces in the same network. So all these address spaces are actually already connected. They can talk to each other. So I hope now you understand both methods to actually create your network infrastructure.
Welcome back. I hope the lab was straightforward, and now you know how easy it is to create a private network and also subdivision of it with subnets. Remember, creating one virtual network with few subnets is easy, but the main complexity actually arises when you have a big organization with many network isolated departments. Plus, if you want to create a line of sight with other organizations or your on premises, making sure that the IPs are not overlapping brings more complexity to it. But remember, the concept still remains true. Virtual network provides an isolated area, or I will say an isolated bubble. You just repeat those concepts in a larger scale. Now, to summarize, Azure VNets are essential building blocks for networking in Azure. They provide secure, private communication for your resources. By understanding and planning subnets and address spaces, you can organize your Azure environment to ensure scalability, security, and optimal performance. When planning your VNet, use subnets to segment your network into smaller, manageable sections. Ensure the address space for your VNet is properly planned to avoid conflicts, no overlapping. Design your network with private communication to secure internal traffics. That was a brief overview of Azure Virtual Network. Stay tuned for deeper dives into additional Azure services. I will see you in the next episode. Take care.